The escape pod tumbled through the darkness of space, spinning slowly like a piece of debris. Its hull was scarred with burn marks and deep scratches. Emergency lights flickered weakly through the small viewport. To anyone watching, it looked like the remnants of a disaster, carrying either a corpse or someone barely clinging to life. Captain Vexthor watched the pod on his display screen with hungry eyes. His ship, the Crimson Talon, had been hunting for 3 cycles in this sector. They had found nothing worth taking until now. A human pod. Alone. Damaged. Perfect. "Bring it in," Vexthor ordered, his voice rumbling through the bridge. His scaled hand gripped the armrest of his command chair. "Carefully. I want whoever is inside alive for questioning." The Xinthians were a warrior race. They stood over 7 feet tall, with natural armor plating covering their bodies like living metal. Their strength was legendary. A single Xinthian could tear through steel with bare hands. They had conquered 12 systems and raided dozens more. Humans, in comparison, were soft, weak, easy prey. Commander Zarketh stood beside the captain's chair, studying the scan results. Life signs are weak but stable. 1 occupant, male. No weapons detected. The pod systems are failing. "Good," Vexthor said, showing his teeth in what passed for a Xinthian smile. "He'll be grateful we saved him, grateful enough to tell us everything about the colony defenses in this region." The crew worked efficiently, bringing the pod into the cargo bay using the ship's tractor beam. 30 Xinthian warriors staffed the Crimson Talon. All of them were experienced raiders. All of them had killed before. They gathered in the cargo, bay weapons ready, watching as the pod settled onto the deck with a metallic thud. Zarketh approached the pod cautiously. Even wounded prey could be dangerous. He keyed the external release and the pod's hatch hissed open. Steam poured out from the failing life support systems. A figure stumbled out, falling to his knees on the deck. He was human, just as the scans had shown. He wore a torn colonial defense uniform. Blood stained his sleeve. His dark hair was matted with sweat. He looked up at the circle of Xinthian warriors surrounding him, and he smiled. That smile made Zarketh pause. It was wrong somehow. A wounded, captured human should be terrified. This one looked almost relieved. "Welcome aboard," Vexthor said in broken human language as he entered the cargo bay. "You are prisoner now. You will answer questions. If you cooperate, you live. If you resist, you die slowly." The human stood slowly, favoring his left side where blood darkened his uniform. He looked around the cargo bay, studying the exits, the equipment, the positions of the warriors. His eyes moved constantly, taking in everything. "What is your name, human?" Vexthor demanded. "Jake," the human said quietly. "Jake Morrison." "Jake Morrison," Vexthor repeated, walking closer. "Where do you come from?" "Sanctuary Colony," Jake said. His voice was calm, too calm. "You destroyed it 2 days ago, killed everyone there. Men, women, children, everyone." Zarketh's eyes narrowed. Sanctuary. Yes, they had raided that colony. It had been an easy target. The defenses had been weak. The humans had fought, but they always fought. It never mattered. The Xinthians always won. "Then you should be grateful we let you live," Vexthor said. "You will tell us about other human colonies, defense grids, supply routes, everything." Jake's smile widened slightly. "No," he said simply. Vexthor backhanded him, the blow sending Jake sprawling across the deck. The human hit hard and lay still for a moment. The Xinthian warriors laughed. This was how it always went. Humans talked tough, then they broke. But Jake pushed himself up again. Blood dripped from his split lip. He wiped it away with the back of his hand and stood. That wrong smile was still on his face. "Lock him in holding cell 3, Vexthor ordered, suddenly uncomfortable. "We'll question him properly later." 2 warriors grabbed Jake's arms and dragged him toward the door. Jake didn't resist. He just kept looking around, studying everything. The door mechanisms, the wall panels, the ventilation grates, everything. They threw him into a small cell and sealed the door. Through the energy barrier, Zarketh watched the human sit down on the bench and close his eyes. He looked like he was resting, preparing for something. "Something is wrong," Zarketh said to Vexthor as they walked back to the bridge. "He's one human," Vexthor snapped, "injured, unarmed, alone on a ship with 30 warriors. What could possibly be wrong?" Zarketh didn't have an answer, but the feeling didn't go away. 3 hours later, the power went out in the detention section. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing the corridors in red. The cell door where Jake had been locked opened with a grinding sound. The energy barrier flickered and died. 2 guards rushed to investigate. They found the cell empty. The ventilation grate had been removed from inside. Impossible. The screws required tools to remove. The grate was made of reinforced metal. "Intruder loose in detention level," one guard barked into his communicator. "The human has escaped." More warriors poured into the section, weapons ready. They searched every cell, every closet, every possible hiding spot. Jake Morrison was nowhere to be found. Then the screaming started. It came from the maintenance tunnel on the lower deck. 2 warriors had gone in to check the power failure. Now only silence came from their communicators. A team rushed to investigate and found them. Both dead, their necks broken with precise efficiency. Alarms began wailing throughout the ship. Vexthor's voice boomed over the intercom. "All warriors to battle stations. Find the human and kill him now." But as the warriors rushed through the corridors, the lights began to flicker. Doors opened and closed randomly. The environmental systems went haywire, making some sections freezing cold and others burning hot. Someone was in the ship's systems playing with them like toys. Zarketh watched the security feeds from the bridge, searching for any sign of Jake Morrison. He caught glimpses. A shadow moving through a Jeffries tube, a figure dropping from a ceiling panel behind an unsuspecting warrior, a face appearing briefly in the camera before that camera went dark. The human wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was hunting. More warriors died. A team of 5 found one of their own hanging from a power conduit, electrocuted. Another warrior was discovered in the cargo bay, his own weapon driven through his chest. 2 more disappeared in the engineering section and were never found. The Xinthians began to understand. They hadn't captured prey. They had brought a predator aboard their ship. And now, locked in here with them, Jake Morrison was going to make them pay for Sanctuary Colony. Every single one of them. The ship groaned as Jake moved through its guts. He crawled through maintenance tunnels that the Xinthians were too large to follow. He knew ships. He had worked on the engineering crews at Sanctuary for 8 years. He understood how they breathed, how they thought, how they could be turned against their owners. Warrior Krelnax moved cautiously down Corridor 17, his weapon raised. He was a veteran of 40 raids. He had killed more humans than he could count. But this felt different. The corridor was too quiet. The lights flickered overhead, casting moving shadows that made him spin around, seeing threats that weren't there. A sound came from behind him, metal scraping on metal. Krelnax turned, bringing his weapon up. Nothing. Just the empty corridor stretching behind him. Then something dropped from the ceiling panel directly above him. Jake landed on Krelnax's shoulders, wrapping his legs around the alien's thick neck. He had a piece of cable in his hands torn from the electrical systems. Before Krelnax could react, Jake wrapped it around the warrior's throat and pulled with everything he had. Xinthians were strong. Their armor plating made them hard to hurt, but they still needed to breathe. Krelnax thrashed, trying to throw the human off. His hands clawed at Jake's legs, leaving deep scratches, but Jake held on, pulling tighter, using his weight and leverage. It took almost 2 minutes for Krelnax to stop moving. Jake dropped to the floor, breathing hard. His legs were bleeding where the alien's claws had dug in. It didn't matter. Pain was just information now. Information telling him he was still alive when everyone he loved was dead. He dragged Krelnax's body into a storage closet and took the warrior's communicator. Then he moved on, disappearing into the ventilation system before anyone could respond to Krelnax's missed check-in. On the bridge, Vexthor stared at the tactical display. 10 warriors dead in 4 hours. 10 trained fighters killed by 1 injured human. It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was terrifying. "He's using the ship against us," Zarketh said, studying the reports. Every death happens near environmental controls or power junctions. He's an engineer. He knows where to strike. Then cut the power, Vexthor growled. All of it. Life support only. Make him come out. If we do that, we lose our sensors. Our communications. We'll be as blind as he is. We have numbers. We have armor. We have weapons. He has nothing. We don't need sensors to kill one human. Zarketh didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. Numbers hadn't helped the 10 dead warriors. Armor hadn't stopped them from dying. This human was different from the others they had fought. This one wasn't trying to survive. He was trying to kill them all. The power died, plunging most of the ship into darkness. Emergency lights created small pools of illumination, but the spaces between them were black as death. The Xinthian warriors formed into groups of 3, moving through the ship in coordinated patterns. Safety in numbers, that's what they told themselves. Jake watched them from inside a wall panel. He had expected this move. Cutting the power made sense if you thought your enemy needed technology to fight, but Jake didn't need sensors or computers. He just needed patience and anger, and he had plenty of both. 3 warriors moved past his position, their footsteps heavy on the deck. Jake let them pass. He waited. Patience was humanity's oldest weapon. Before guns, before swords, before fire, humans had patience. They could track an animal for days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The warriors reached the end of the corridor and turned to come back. That's when Jake moved. He had found a plasma torch in the maintenance locker. It was meant for cutting through bulkheads during repairs. It made a terrible weapon, but desperate times called for desperate measures. He stepped out of the wall panel behind the last warrior in the group and pressed the torch against the back of the alien's knee joint, where the armor was thinnest. The warrior screamed as the torch burned through. He collapsed and his companion spun around, but Jake was already gone, vanished into the darkness like smoke. The wounded warrior's screams echoed through the corridor. His companions dragged him toward the medical bay, constantly checking the shadows around them. They didn't see Jake following them, moving from cover to cover, watching and learning their patterns. Time passed. Minutes. Hours. Jake lost track. It didn't matter. He had learned something important during those final days at Sanctuary, when the Xinthians had attacked. He had learned that he could function without sleep, without food, without anything except purpose. He remembered finding Lisa in the rubble of their home, remembered holding Emma's small hand one last time, remembered the faces of his neighbors, his friends all gone. The Xinthians had done that. They had come to Sanctuary looking for easy prey, and they had slaughtered everyone. Now they were the prey, and Jake was teaching them what it felt like. Another warrior died in the engine room. Jake had rigged a fuel line to rupture when the alien tried to restore power to that section. The explosion was small but deadly in the confined space. 2 more warriors died responding to that emergency. Caught in a corridor, Jake had depressurized remotely. The Xinthians were down to 15 warriors, half their crew. The ship felt haunted now. Every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible ambush. Warriors who had fought in dozens of battles found themselves jumping at noises, firing at ghosts. Vexthor finally understood. They weren't fighting a human. They were fighting humanity's true nature, stripped of civilization and restraint. They were fighting evolution's finest predator, the species that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain not through strength or speed, but through intelligence and absolute refusal to give up. "We need to evacuate," Zarketh said quietly. "Take the escape pods. Abandon the ship. And go where?" Vexthor demanded. "We're 3 days from the nearest Xinthian outpost. The pods don't have that range. Then we send a distress signal. And tell them what? That we're being killed by one human? They'll never let us live down the shame. Better shame than death." Vexthor struck Zarketh across the face. "We are Xinthian warriors. We don't run from prey." But in his eyes, Zarketh could see the truth. Vexthor was afraid. They all were. Because somewhere in the darkness of this ship, Jake Morrison was waiting, planning, hunting, and he wouldn't stop until every last one of them was dead. Jake sat in the ventilation shaft above the bridge, listening to them argue. He had the plasma torch in one hand and a length of sharpened pipe in the other. His body ached. His wounds had stopped bleeding, but they hurt. He was exhausted beyond measure. But he smiled anyway, because the Xinthians were beginning to understand what they had done. They were beginning to feel what the people of Sanctuary had felt in their final moments. They were beginning to know fear. The remaining 15 Xinthian warriors gathered in the main cargo bay. It was the largest open space on the ship, with good sight lines and only 4 entrances. They could defend it. They could watch all the approaches. They could finally make a stand. "We hold this position," Vexthor announced. "Set up defensive positions at each entrance. Anyone comes through those doors, you shoot first. No hesitation." The warriors moved quickly, grateful to finally have a plan that made sense. They pushed cargo containers into defensive walls. They set up overlapping fields of fire. They positioned their strongest fighters at each entrance. For the first time in hours, they felt like they might survive this. Jake watched them from his hiding spot in the overhead crane system. The cargo bay was smart. It gave them space to maneuver and clear sight lines, but it also trapped them. They had gathered in one place thinking it made them safer. They were wrong. He didn't attack immediately. Instead, he moved through the ship like a ghost, gathering what he needed. He found chemical containers in the engineering section. He located the atmospheric control systems. He studied the cargo bay's ventilation layout. Then he started working. The Xinthians waited. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Some of them began to relax slightly. Maybe the human had fled to the escape pods. Maybe he was hiding, too injured to continue fighting. Maybe they had finally gotten lucky. Then the smell started. It was faint at first, a sharp chemical odor that made their eyes water. Within minutes, it grew stronger. The warriors coughed and covered their faces. Their eyes burned. Their throats felt raw. "He's pumped something into the ventilation," Zarketh said, pulling his uniform over his nose and mouth. "It didn't help much. We need to evacuate this position." "No," Vexthor commanded, though his own eyes were streaming with tears. "That's what he wants. We stay together." But the gas grew thicker. Warriors stumbled, gasping for clean air. Their armor protected their bodies but did nothing for their lungs. Some collapsed to their knees, coughing violently. Others fired blindly at the ventilation grates, hoping to hit Jake if he was up there. They hit nothing but metal and pipes. "We have to move," Zarketh insisted. "We're sitting targets here." Vexthor finally nodded. "Fall back to the bridge. Stay together. Watch every angle." The warriors moved as a group, supporting the ones who were worst affected by the gas. They moved slowly, weapons ready, expecting an ambush at every turn. But nothing happened. The corridors were empty. The shadows were still. They reached the bridge without incident and sealed the doors behind them. The bridge had its own life support system. The air here was clean. The warriors gasped in relief, filling their lungs with oxygen that didn't burn. "See?" Vexthor said, trying to sound confident. "We're safe here. The bridge has reinforced doors. Multiple backup power systems.
He can't gas us out."
He can't break in. We just wait for him to make a mistake." But Jake wasn't making mistakes. He was making a point. The lights in the bridge flickered. Then every screen came to life at once. Security camera footage played on each display. Not current footage. Old footage. From 2 days ago. It showed Sanctuary Colony. It showed Xinthian raiders attacking the settlement. It showed people running, screaming, dying. It showed children being cut down as they tried to flee. It showed homes burning. It showed everything the Xinthians had done. The warriors watched in silence. Some looked away. Others stared, remembering. It had been just another raid to them. Just another human colony. Nothing special. Nothing worth remembering. The footage ended. The screens went black. Then words appeared, typed one letter at a time across every display in perfect Xinthian script. "You killed my wife. Lisa Morrison. Age 32. Engineer. She died trying to protect the power station so others could escape." The screens cleared. New words appeared. "You killed my daughter. Emma Morrison. Age 7. She loved drawing pictures of stars. She wanted to be an explorer when she grew up." More names appeared. More ages, more descriptions. Jake was listing everyone who had died at Sanctuary. All 237 colonists. He gave each one a name and age, a small detail that made them real. That made them matter. The Xinthian warriors shifted uncomfortably. They didn't want to think about the people they had killed as individuals. It was easier when they were just targets, just numbers, just prey. The list finally ended. A new message appeared. "I learned your language from your ship's computer. I learned your names from your crew files. I know everything about each of you. Where you come from. Who you've killed. What you've done. Vexthor slammed his fist against the console. Shut it down. Shut all of it down. But the screens wouldn't respond to commands. Jake had locked them out of their own systems. Now I will tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to kill all of you. Not because it will bring them back. Not because it changes anything. But because you need to understand. You need to know what happens when you hunt humans. The screens went dark again. Then a new image appeared. Security footage from the cargo bay. From hours ago when Jake had been crawling through the crane system. The angle showed him looking directly into the camera. His face was covered in blood and bruises. But he was smiling that same terrible smile. We don't just survive, the message continued. We remember, we adapt, and we never ever forgive. The screens went dead. The lights returned to normal. But the damage was done. The Xinthian warriors looked at each other with new understanding. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about making them feel what their victims had felt. Terror, helplessness, the certainty of death coming from something they couldn't fight. He's playing with us, one warrior said, his voice shaking. He could have killed us in the cargo bay when we were choking on that gas. But he let us go. He's making this last. Because he wants us to be afraid, another added. He wants us to suffer. Zarketh looked at Vexthor. We need to talk to him, negotiate, offer him the escape pods. Let him leave. He doesn't want to leave, Vexthor said quietly. He wants us dead. All of us. Sounds began echoing through the ship. Footsteps in empty corridors. Doors opening and closing. Metallic clangs in the walls around them. The Xinthians spun in every direction, trying to pinpoint the source. But the sounds came from everywhere and nowhere. Then Jake's voice came over the intercom. He spoke in Xinthian now, his accent rough but understandable. There are 14 of you left. The wounded one from earlier died while you were in the cargo bay. I found him trying to crawl to the medical bay. The warriors counted themselves, 13 in the bridge. Jake was right. Someone was missing. I am in your walls. I am in your systems. I am in your head now. You can seal yourselves in the bridge. You can wait for rescue that will never come. But eventually you will have to eat. You will have to sleep. And when you do, I will be there. Vexthor grabbed the communicator. You're just one human. You can't win. I already have, Jake's voice replied. Because you're never going to forget this. Every Xinthian ship that hears this story will think twice before attacking a human colony. Every warrior will remember that strength and armor mean nothing against someone who has nothing left to lose. We could blow the ship, Zarketh suggested desperately. Set the reactor to overload. Take him with us and die as cowards? Vexthor shook his head. No, we're warriors. We fight. But in the dark corners of the bridge, in the silence between the mysterious sounds, they all wondered the same thing. How did you fight an enemy who didn't fear death? Who welcomed it? Who had already lost everything that mattered? The answer was simple, and they all knew it. You didn't. 20 hours had passed since the Xinthians sealed themselves on the bridge. They took turns sleeping, always keeping 6 warriors on watch. They rationed the emergency supplies stored in the bridge lockers. They watched the doors and waited. Jake was patient. He had time. The Xinthians didn't. He used those 20 hours to prepare. He studied every schematic of the bridge he could pull from the ship's database. He learned where the structural weak points were. He gathered tools and materials. He planned 3 different ways to breach their sanctuary, then picked the one they would never expect. The Xinthians were watching the doors. They had barricaded each entrance with furniture and equipment. They had motion sensors set up in the corridors outside. They were ready for a frontal assault. They weren't ready for Jake to come through the floor. The bridge sat directly above a maintenance tunnel that ran the length of the ship. Jake had spent hours cutting through the deck plating with his plasma torch, working slowly to avoid making noise. He cut a circle large enough for him to fit through, leaving just a thin piece of metal holding it in place. He waited until the shift changed when the Xinthians were at their most distracted. Then he struck. The floor panel fell inward with a crash. Jake came through the hole before the warriors could react, throwing a flash grenade he had made from spare parts and chemicals. The bridge filled with blinding light and deafening sound. The Xinthians stumbled, their enhanced senses overloaded. Jake moved through them like death itself. He had a sharpened pipe in each hand. He was smaller than them, weaker than them, but he was faster and he knew exactly where to strike. The first warrior fell with a pipe through the soft tissue under his jaw. The second got it through the eye socket. Jake moved constantly, never staying still, using the confused warriors as shields against their companions who were trying to shoot him. Vexthor recovered first, his battle experience cutting through the disorientation. He saw Jake and charged, his massive arms reaching to crush the human. Jake dropped to the floor, sliding between Vexthor's legs. As he passed underneath, he slashed with his improvised weapons, cutting the tendons behind the captain's knees. Vexthor crashed to the deck with a roar of pain and fury. Jake was already moving again, dancing between the warriors like he could predict their movements. He had studied them for almost a full day now. He knew how they fought. He knew their patterns. He knew their weaknesses. A warrior got his hands on Jake, lifting him off the ground. The alien's strength was incredible. He began to squeeze, trying to crush Jake's ribs. Jake drove both pipes into the warrior's throat, one on each side. The Xinthian dropped him and fell backward, choking on his own blood. Zarketh fired his weapon, the plasma bolt missing Jake by inches. The shot hit a control console instead, showering sparks across the bridge. Jake grabbed a fallen warrior's weapon and returned fire. His aim was poor, but at close range it didn't matter. Zarketh went down with a smoking hole in his chest. The fighting was brutal and chaotic. The bridge became a nightmare of flashing weapons, screaming warriors, and blood on every surface. The Xinthians had the advantage in strength and armor. Jake had desperation and the certainty that he was already dead. He just hadn't stopped moving yet. One by one, the warriors fell. Jake took damage too. A claw tore across his back. A plasma bolt grazed his shoulder. A Xinthian fist connected with his ribs, cracking at least 2 of them. But he kept fighting. Pain was temporary. Death was forever, and he had promised himself he would take every single one of them before he stopped. Finally, only Vexthor remained. The captain had dragged himself to a corner, his legs useless from Jake's earlier attack. He still held his weapon, tracking Jake with it as the human circled slowly. "You should have killed me first," Vexthor growled. "When you had the advantage." Jake shook his head. "I wanted you to watch. I wanted you to see your crew die, just like I watched mine. We are warriors. We conquer, we raid. It is our nature." "And this is mine," Jake replied, gesturing at the carnage around them. "You thought humans were weak because we build things instead of destroying them. Because we create instead of conquer, but we're only civilized when we choose to be. Take away everything we love and you find out what we really are." "What are you?" Jake's smile was terrible to see. "We're the species that survived the Ice Age with nothing but sharp rocks and stubbornness. We're the species that looked at every dangerous animal on our planet and said, 'I can kill that.' We're the species that turned wolves into dogs and bent an entire world to our will. We're persistence predators, Captain. We run our prey to exhaustion and we never ever give up." Vexthor fired. The shot took Jake in the side, burning through flesh. Jake stumbled but didn't fall. He threw one of his pipes like a spear. It struck Vexthor's weapon arm, making him drop the gun. Jake walked forward, limping now, bleeding from multiple wounds. He picked up Vexthor's fallen weapon and tossed it away. Then he dragged himself to where the captain lay. "Why?" Vexthor asked. His voice was weaker now. "Why not just kill me and be done?" "Because I need you to answer a question," Jake said, sitting down heavily against the wall near the captain. His own wounds were serious. He could feel blood pooling under him. "Did you think about them? When you were attacking Sanctuary, did you think about the people you were killing? Did you care that they had names, families, lives?" Vexthor was silent for a long moment. Then quietly he said, "No, they were just humans. Just prey." Jake nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." "You want to know something funny? I never killed anyone before 3 days ago. I was an engineer. I fixed things. I built things. I had a good life with people I loved. You took that from me. You made me into this." He gestured at himself, covered in blood and burns and cuts. "You created the thing that killed your entire crew. Remember that. Remember that every time you thought humans were weak or easy prey, you were wrong. We're only peaceful because we choose to be. Take away that choice and you get me." Vexthor's breathing was labored. His wounds were catching up with him. "So what happens now? You kill me and die from your wounds?" "Probably," Jake admitted. "But first, I need to make sure this matters. I need to make sure every Xinthian knows what happened here." With the last of his strength, Jake pulled himself to the captain's console. His fingers were clumsy on the controls, but he managed to activate the ship's long-range communications. He set it to broadcast on all frequencies, repeating endlessly. Then he activated every security camera recording from the moment he had come aboard. Every fight, every death, every moment of his systematic destruction of the crew. He packaged it all together and set it to transmit along with the data from Sanctuary Colony. There, he said, sliding back down to the floor. Now everyone will know. The Xinthians, the humans, everyone. They'll know what happens when you push us too far. Vexthor watched the human, this small, wounded creature who had destroyed his ship and crew. You are a monster, he said. No, Jake replied. You made me necessary. There's a difference. They sat in silence as their lives bled away. Outside, the message transmitted endlessly into space, carrying the truth of what had happened aboard the Crimson Talon to anyone who would listen. The human patrol ship Newton's Pride picked up the distress signal 3 days later. Captain Helen Grant studied the data streaming from the Xinthian raider with growing disbelief. The ship was broadcasting detailed recordings of its own crew being systematically killed by a single human survivor. Get me Colonial Command, she ordered. They need to see this. By the time they reached the Crimson Talon, the recordings had already spread across dozens of systems. Human colonies, alien trading posts, military channels. Even the Xinthian Empire itself had received the transmission. Everyone was watching. Everyone was talking about what had happened. The boarding team found the bridge first. 13 dead Xinthian warriors scattered across the deck, and among them, slumped against the wall, was Jake Morrison. He was barely alive. His wounds should have killed him hours ago, but somehow he had held on. Medic, Grant shouted. Get him to medical, now. As they carried Jake away on a stretcher, Grant looked around the bridge at the carnage. At the blood. At the fallen warriors. One human had done this. One injured, grieving engineer had brought down an entire crew of alien raiders. The medical team worked for 6 hours to stabilize Jake. Burns, lacerations, broken ribs, internal bleeding, plasma burns. The list went on. They saved his life, but the doctor told Grant it was a close thing. He should have died a dozen times over, the doctor said, shaking his head. His body was running on nothing but adrenaline and willpower. I've never seen anything like it. Jake woke up 2 days later in a clean hospital bed on a human medical station. For a moment he didn't remember where he was. Then it all came back. Sanctuary, the Xinthians, the ship, the fighting. Easy, a nurse said, noticing he was awake. You're safe. You're on medical station Hope. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Vexthor? Jake asked, his voice rough from disuse. The Xinthian captain? He died from his wounds about an hour after we found you. You were the only survivor. Jake closed his eyes. He felt empty. The anger that had kept him alive was gone now, burned out like a spent fuel cell. All that remained was grief and exhaustion. Captain Grant visited him that afternoon. She sat beside his bed and told him what had happened after the Newton's Pride found him. Your recordings went viral, she explained. Every species in this sector has seen them. The Xinthian Empire is in chaos. Half of their military command is calling it propaganda. The other half is demanding an investigation into how 30 warriors died to one human. It wasn't propaganda, Jake said quietly. I know, we verified everything. The recordings from Sanctuary, the security footage from the Crimson Talon. It's all real, and it's changed everything. She pulled up a datapad and showed him news reports from across the galaxy. Alien species that had been considering aggression against human colonies were suddenly reconsidering. The Xinthian Empire had issued a statement, declaring human territories off limits for raiding. Other aggressive species were following suit. They're afraid, Grant said simply. They thought they understood humans. They thought they knew what we were capable of. You showed them they were wrong. I just wanted them to pay for what they did, Jake said. I wanted them to understand. They understand now. Every alien that watches those recordings sees the same thing. They see what happens when you push humans past the breaking point. They see that our civilization, our kindness, our cooperation, all of that is a choice. And if you take away what we love, if you kill our families, you face what's underneath. You face the predator that conquered an entire planet. Jake looked away. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who lost everything. Maybe, Grant agreed, but you're also the reason human colonies will be safer now. You're the reason aliens think twice before attacking us. Like it or not, you've become a symbol. The lone human who survived. The one who fought back. Over the following weeks, Jake slowly recovered. His physical wounds healed faster than his mental ones. He had nightmares every night. He saw Lisa and Emma in his dreams, saw them die over and over. He saw the Xinthian warriors too, saw their faces as they died. The military offered him a commission, a position training special forces in ship-to-ship combat, a chance to turn his experience into something that could help protect others. He refused. He had done enough killing. The media wanted interviews. Everyone wanted to hear his story in his own words. He refused them all. What was there to say? That grief could turn an engineer into an executioner? That humans were capable of terrible things when pushed? They had already seen the recordings, they knew. Finally, after 2 months of recovery, Jake was cleared to return to civilian life. The military gave him a shuttle and supplies. Colonial Command gave him his choice of assignments. He could go anywhere, do anything. He was famous now, whether he wanted to be or not. He chose to return to Sanctuary. The colony was still in ruins. The buildings were burned shells. The homes were rubble. But the land was still there. The sky was still beautiful. This was where Lisa and Emma were buried. This was home. Other survivors had returned too. 23 people had been off-world when the Xinthians attacked. They had come back to rebuild. When they saw Jake, they didn't treat him like a hero or a monster. They treated him like what he was. A survivor, someone who understood loss. Together, they began to rebuild. It was slow work. The colonial government sent supplies and workers. Other colonies sent donations. Even some alien species, embarrassed by what the Xinthians had done, sent aid. Sanctuary would rise again. Jake worked on the engineering projects just like he had before. He rebuilt power systems and water processors. He fixed what was broken. It was simple work. Honest work, it helped. Sometimes at night he would visit the memorial they had built. 237 names carved into stone. Lisa Morrison, Emma Morrison, all the others. He would sit there in the quiet and remember them as they had been. Happy, alive, full of hope for the future, and sometimes ships would pass overhead. Alien vessels traveling the trade routes. They would see Sanctuary below and they would remember the recordings. They would remember what had happened on the Crimson Talon. They would remember the price of underestimating humanity. 6 months after the incident, Jake received a message from the Xinthian Empire. It was an official apology for the attack on Sanctuary. They offered reparations. They offered to punish the families of the warriors who had participated. They offered everything they could think of to make amends. Jake deleted the message without responding. No amount of money or punishment would bring back the dead. The only thing that mattered was making sure it never happened again. And from what he heard, it wouldn't. The Xinthians had learned their lesson. So had everyone else. A phrase had entered galactic vocabulary. Translators rendered it slightly differently depending on the species. But the meaning was always the same. Remember Sanctuary. It was a warning, a reminder, a promise that humanity would defend its own no matter the cost. Jake Morrison went back to being an engineer. He built things. He fixed things. He helped make Sanctuary into a home again. He never spoke publicly about what had happened on the Crimson Talon. He didn't need to. The recordings spoke for themselves. And across the galaxy in 1,000 different languages, people watched them and understood. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or the most heavily armed. But they were survivors. They were adapters. They were the species that had looked at the stars and decided they belonged there, no matter who tried to stop them. And if you threatened them, if you killed their loved ones, if you pushed them past the point where civilization and mercy could reach, you would face something that had survived millions of years of evolution by being the best at one simple thing: never giving up, never backing down, never stopping until the threat was eliminated. Jake Morrison had shown the galaxy what that looked like, and the galaxy would never forget.